Here we are, folks, in the process of looking for a set of rings for this. I stumbled across this kit on eBay. It's a 70cc big bore kit, and it was actually pretty reasonably priced. A little more than I was gonna spend on this thing, but then my daughter decided that her exact words were, "I'll learn to drive a bike if you paint it pink." So I do want her to learn, and this is a perfect bike for her to learn. I sure can't put her on my son's YZ85. So I did it. I spent the 200 and some bucks and got in a whole big bore kit, and you can see it's everything you see here. It's the entire top end, all the gaskets, piston rings, cylinder, head, all the valves. It's all a whole brand new top end, and it's 70cc, so it'll bump it up a little bit. And yeah, it's all here. It showed up yesterday, and we're gonna put it in today. So first thing is gonna be to put the piston back on the connecting rod. You can see I got the rag stuffed in there so nothing falls down while the engine was sitting here. And we'll get started on that. Okay, piston's on. And if I can get the sun to, there we go. You'll notice here on the piston, there we go, it says in, so that's your intake side. This is towards the back of the engine. And the pin itself, piston pin, is in. Again, when you go to put the pins in, just use your fingers, don't use tools. And just wiggle the piston and, back and forth as you put a little bit of pressure to line things up, and it'll go right in. And once it's flush, you're ready for your circlips. Alright, right there. And this is where the rag is really important, because these things fall into there, or here for that matter. Alright, when they fall in there, you're going to be fishing them out and possibly having to split the crank. And you don't want to have to get into that. Alright, clips are in. These ones are a little different. You notice they got a little, they're sort of shaped like a capital G rather than a C clip. Makes it actually pretty easy, because you can grip right onto the center part here with needle nose and rotate it, and it takes a lot of the tension off. What I did is I just put my thumb over it as I was doing it, just in case, so they didn't come flying out. There's quite a bit of tension on these compared to some of the others I've done. Make sure you don't leave your gap over on this side where the slot is. My gap is exactly opposite of that on both sides. And yeah, not much to it. Alright, next thing we're going to do is piston rings. Your oil expander ring and your bottom scraper. There's the other one there, and then your compression rings. Right out of the package, I got that one in already. Focus, there we go. You can see it looks pretty close to the gap you want, and there's a 16 thousandths feeler gauge. And when I put it in there, it actually goes perfect. Hard to do with one hand here, I'm not that steady. But when I checked it, it slid right in, 16 thousandths, which is right about what you want for these rings. I never bothered to check the specs. I'm going to do that here in a second. But so I'm going to gap each one except for the expander. That'll be fine. I'm going to check each one. I just wanted to point out here with the compression rings that, I don't know if you can see it, there is a difference. One is red and the other is silver. The red one is actually piston ring number 2, and it's a little bit thinner than the top one. Alright, so make sure you put those in right. We'll get to that when we get to it. Okay. Focus, there we go. Alright, rings are in. Everything's rotating nice and smooth like they're supposed to. I just want to show you here, this is exactly what you don't want to happen. all right, where the gaps are in line. All right, because once they squeeze into the cylinder, there's still going to be that 16 thousandths of a gap. And something like that will be a lot of compression loss. And this is why we gap our rings. Okay, so we'll rotate into different spots on the piston so that oil has to go up, hit a ring, go over to the next gap kind of thing, instead of shooting straight up, and compression can't shoot straight down. It takes time for fuel in there to move, right? It's not an instantaneous thing, so it's got to go down, all the way around, find the next gap, and there's just not time in the amount of time the piston takes to go up and down for that to occur. So gapping is critical. Okay, about to install the seals here for the oil return line, which is located here. I got the gasket already in place. Now there's two different ones on this. There's a thinner one and a thicker one, or sorry, larger diameter and a shorter diameter. One had on the original this small steel, looks like a washer in the top, and that was on between the head and the cylinder. And this one will go right in there like so, and it just kind of sits there. It's goofy, but that's the way she goes. One thing about this kit, considering everything else was included, I'm kind of surprised, is I had to remove the old dowels. Now, if you've never done those, you got to be careful. You can't squeeze on them with a pair of pliers or anything this way because they're thin wall and they're soft. So what I did is just reach in here with the needle nose, give them a little bit of pressure while gently wiggling, and they'll walk right out eventually. You can see it's actually moving there, so you just gotta wiggle it and be patient with it, and they'll come out eventually. Just about there. Okay, so just make sure when you're doing them you don't squeeze the whole thing, because you will just flatten it and then you'll be screwed. You'll never get it round again. Alright, so very gently and wiggle it. You can almost pull them out, some of them, with your fingers. Like that. I finished it off with my finger. So there you go. So make sure you use your dowels. Just remember where they went. Most times, this one looks rather unique in that the holes all look to be the same diameter. Most times the dowels will only go in a certain spot. We'll see if that's the case here or not. Alright, ready to slide the cylinder on here. You notice all the oil inside the cylinder. Alright, a good healthy coat of new oil. Things are going to be dry while you're starting to kick this and assemble it, so you don't want to risk any unnecessary damage, spend all that money. Piston as well, covered in oil. Last check of the ring gaps. Little rubber seal sitting in here. That's something you're going to want to check. You see how easy it is to fall out as you're doing it. Just to make sure it doesn't fall out. So I got a paper towel down below, and I'll be able to see if it comes out, and I'll check it before I bottom the cylinder down anyway. The chain, a lot of times you could run a wire up and down, but because this engine basically sits horizontal, I just brought it up, fished a little screwdriver through for now. It's not as big a problem as some of the chains that go straight up and down, or almost straight up and down, who will all be trying to fall back inside. This one's actually going to be pretty easy to do. And yeah, let's put that sucker on there. What you're going to do is you're going to squeeze the rings as you go. And you just start it in the cylinder like that. And the bottom of the cylinder is tapered anyways. So you just squeeze the rings, make sure your gaps are all in the right spot as you're going, and gently rock the head. The cylinder and the piston, and apply a little downwards pressure. Don't hit them. They don't need to be smacked with even a rubber mallet. They should with all the oil, and if the gaps are correct, it should just slide right on down. And of course, piston's in, no problem. You see a little puddle of oil down there. Things are sealing up good. Chain's now hanging, no problem. As promised, it fell out, just the act of wiggling. Okay, so we're gonna, as we go down, we're gonna put that back in as it gets a little closer, and finish sliding the cylinder down. Okay, so got her just about ready to button up, and of course my focus doesn't want to work. There we go. Just about ready to button up. Gasket's in place. You can see the little rubber seals out. Okay, so we're going to pop that back in, just like so. You could use a little grease if you're concerned about it, but what I do with this is, right now the piston is up, so it's close to top dead center. What I'll do is I'll just look in there and rotate, and what this is doing, we'll pull the piston, cylinder, and everything down. Now, with two hands, you'd obviously be pulling on that chain so it wouldn't bind like that, but you just keep an eye on that little thing, and poop, she'll pop right down. Okay, just by rotating the flywheel, you can bring it in the last little way, and that way you freeze up your hands for holding the chain and that little seal in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put the screw in here, and that'll help hold this assembly in while I get to work on the top. Okay, this next part is about the trickiest thing on this whole build. It's the little roller that goes inside the cylinder here for the chain. Now, what's tricky about it is it's so narrow that you can't get your fingers in there. You have to position the bolt in the hole, which, as you notice, the bolt, and focus, there we go. The bolt has threads that thread into the cylinder, so it doesn't go all the way through. Okay, so it'll be something like that. The problem is that if it was just a wheel, you'd be fine. But you also have to put that little washer on there between the wheel and the bolt. Okay, and this is where things get tricky, because you slide that thing down there, it could end up in China, literally. You know, figuratively, I guess. But anyways, so what I do is I'll put the bolt in the hole, carefully fish this on the end, and then position the wheel. There's not a lot of room to work, and if you got needle nose, really long needle nose like these guys here, they come in handy to help hold things. You can do it without, but just be careful about that washer, because otherwise you'll be pulling the cylinder off again to go fish it out. Alright, I figured I'd show you what I was talking about here. I know it's kind of dark in there, but you can see the washers on the end of the bolt. I carefully feed the chain and the roller down until the roller is what's preventing the washer from falling off. Now it's just a matter of wiggling that roller with a screwdriver until you can line up the hole, and then you're golden. At this point, you're pretty good. It won't fall off if you're careful. It's getting that roller into that location that's tricky.